the most expensive affection ever bought. My mom and dad made me keep track of every time I touched someone with a point system. Hugs cost 50 points, and we only got 1,000 points each month. When my best friend's dad died and she cried in my arms for 40 minutes, I used up 2,000 points, helping her feel better at the funeral. Then, I found video of my parents touching each other freely every night, after making us kids count points all day. This proved their whole system was just about controlling us. When I was growing up, I thought everyone's parents made them swipe their wristband before hugging goodnight. Dad put shiny charts on every wall, showing how many points different touches cost. Hugs cost 50 points. High fives were 15 points. If you accidentally brushed past someone in the hallway, you lost 5 points and had to pay it back before bedtime. We each got 1,000 points every month. There were LED screens in the kitchen that counted down with every touch. The first time I realized other families didn't live like this was at a friend's birthday party when I was 11. I watched in shock as kids just hugged, wrestled, and gave each other piggyback rides without writing anything down. When the birthday girl hugged me goodbye, I got scared and asked her mom where their point tracker was. The quiet that followed still makes me feel embarrassed. When I asked my parents about it that night, my father finally told me about his touch money theory. He pulled out a big folder full of research he'd put together about how letting kids touch people freely creates addiction and weakness. He showed me articles about kids who get too attached, which he'd highlighted and written notes like "See, unlimited touching equals damaged children." He said the touch budget taught us to value physical contact and stopped us from becoming touch addicts who would do anything for human contact. My mother nodded along, adding that people who touched freely were spending feelings they hadn't earned. She showed me her own childhood diary, where her mother had made her write down every hug. Though without the fancy tracking system we had, technology just makes it more exact, she said. The system got worse after that talk. Dad added touch quality scores where he'd rate each physical touch on how real and needed it was. A comforting hug from my little sister when she fell off her bike cost me 50 points, plus only got a 3 out of 10 quality score because he thought it was too much for a small injury. He also made the touch detention room, a changed closet with soft walls where anyone who went over their monthly points had to sit alone for hours equal to how many points they went over. My older brother spent 3 days in there once after his girlfriend visited and they held hands without buying a visitor touch package first. The worst part was how it made every physical touch feel bad. When my sister got really sick at 14, I had to think about whether I had enough points to hold her hand during her hospital stay. When she squeezed back weakly, Dad took away 10 of her points for touching back without permission. I watched my points go down on the hospital room screen he'd put up. Choosing between comforting my sick sister and saving points for my mom's birthday hug, the next week school became like walking through a minefield. I couldn't play sports because contact cost too much. Group projects where someone might pat my shoulder could use up my whole monthly allowance. I became known as the weird kid who pulled away from any contact. I wore thick clothes even in summer to avoid accidental brushes. That would set off my closeness alarm. Dating was obviously impossible. My parents made any possible boyfriend or girlfriend sign a touch pre-agreement and buy point packages ahead of time. They had a whole price list for different relationship stages. Holding hands was 500 points per hour. Hugs 100 points each. Kissing needed a special license and cost half your yearly point allowance. When I was 17, my best friend's father died suddenly in a car crash. At the funeral, she fell apart, crying into my arms. I held her while she shook, her tears getting my shirt wet, not caring that my wristband was beeping like crazy with each point it took away. By the time she finally let go, I'd used 2,000 points. 2 months worth of points gone in 40 minutes of sadness. My father was waiting in the parking lot with his tablet, showing me the real-time point loss. He'd watched it from far away, figuring out that I'd be in touch detention until I graduated. When I told him it was worth it to comfort my friend, he said I was proving his theory about touch addiction. You just threw away months of carefully saved affection on someone who isn't even family, he said. This is exactly the kind of careless touching that destroys lives. That's when I decided I was done. I ripped off my wristband and threw it at his feet, saying his system was crazy and had turned our family into robots, afraid of basic human connection. My mother, watching from the car, started screaming about the $50,000 they'd spent on the tracking system and how I was throwing away their love. But my parents didn't accept my rebellion. They got a court order against my friend for helping me steal touches and put in new closeness alarms that screamed if anyone came within 3 feet of me. They sued my school for not making sure their touch budget was followed during classes and wanted cameras in every room to watch for unauthorized contact events. And for once, I was ready to fight back. The GPS tracker discovery happened 3 days later. I'd stopped at the grocery store after my morning work shift, getting energy drinks to survive another sleepless night of closeness alarms. My phone buzzed with a notification I'd never seen before. Vehicle stopped for 12 minutes. Touch tax watching active. My hand shook as I checked the app settings. There it was, hidden in the family safety features. Real-time location tracking connected to my parents' account. I ran to my car, crawling underneath to find the small black device stuck to the frame with magnets. The timestamp showed it was put there at 3 a.m. 2 nights ago, while I'd been passed out from being so tired. They'd broken even the pretense of boundaries, coming into my space while I slept. The 15-minute delay getting back to work sealed my fate. My manager stood at the time clock, arms crossed, watching me punch in late. This was my 3rd time being late in 2 weeks, all because of my parents' increasing interference. She pulled me aside, voice low but firm. One more incident, she warned, and I'd be looking for a new job. I needed this job desperately. It was my only income, my only hope of eventually escaping. 20 minutes into my drive-through shift, a familiar car pulled up to the speaker. My mother's voice came through the headset, ordering a large coffee with 2 sugars. My stomach dropped as she pulled forward to my window. She smiled that practiced smile while handing over exact change, mentioning casually that she'd sent my touch debt to my college financial aid office. They needed to know about my financial obligations to the family before approving any loans. Her wristband caught the afternoon light as she reached for the coffee. The display showed negative 27 points. She hadn't hugged my father in 6 days. The unfairness burned in my throat as I watched her write notes about our interaction on her phone, typing notes about my obvious emotional problems and aggressive cup handling. My hands shook uncontrollably as the next car pulled up. I dropped change, spilled a drink, mixed up orders. Each mistake made the next one worse, while my mother sat in the parking lot, her phone camera pointed at the drive-thru. Window 3 messed up orders in a row. My coworker touched my shoulder gently, offering to cover while I dealt with whatever this is. She needed me to work her weekend shift when her daughter had surgery, but she'd take over now if I needed it. I almost accepted, almost walked away from the register and confronted my mother in the parking lot, but I couldn't afford to lose this job. So I stayed, forcing my hands steady, pushing through each order while watching my mother text furiously from her car. Through the window, I could see her phone screen. She was sending photos to someone, probably the family lawyer. 3 times, she reached for her door handle, half moving to get out, then settling back to continue watching me. My phone exploded with notifications during a brief break between customers. The family group chat showed my father's latest post to our neighborhood Facebook group asking for advice. Teen refusing therapeutic touch boundaries, worried about mental health. Any recommendations for intervention? The comments poured in. 47 sympathetic responses in the first hour. Neighbors I'd known since childhood offered prayers, suggested therapists, praised my parents' dedication to innovative parenting. Extended family joined the pylon. Aunts and uncles who'd never questioned the touch system now texted concerns about my breakdown and rejection of family values. The school counselor sent an email requesting an urgent meeting. The family therapist my parents had hired when I was 12 wanted to schedule an emergency session. Each message pulled my focus from work, from the customers waiting in line, from the register I was supposed to be counting. The drawer came up $23 short. My manager's sympathy disappeared instantly as she counted it a second time, then a third. This wasn't just being late anymore. This was money missing on my shift. She wrote down the shortage while I stood there, knowing my parents would use this too. Evidence of my inability to handle responsibility. Proof that their touch system was necessary to provide structure I clearly lacked. My shift ended at 8 p.m. I'd survived 9 hours of constant interruption. Harassment disguised as concern, watching disguised as love. But my parents waited in the parking lot, engine running, hazard lights blinking. They'd timed their arrival perfectly for maximum visibility as the closing shift staff headed to their cars. My father stepped out first, tablet in hand, ready for our emergency family meeting. That's when I saw her in the back seat. My 13-year-old sister came out slowly, a new wristband glowing on her thin wrist. The display showed negative 347 points. Negative. I'd never seen anyone go into touch debt that deep. Her eyes met mine, across the parking lot, hollow and exhausted. She'd been crying, the salt trails still visible on her cheeks, my mother explained, with clinical coldness. They'd discovered my sister accepting unauthorized comfort from friends at school. 3 hugs after news of the court order spread. 3 simple human moments of compassion that put her hundreds of points in debt. The hidden cameras they'd put in her backpack had captured everything. Audio and video of her friends trying to console her about her crazy family situation. The watching network went beyond our home. My sister's best friend's mother stood by a nearby car, phone raised, recording our confrontation as a concerned community member. She'd probably been asked to document any aggressive behavior for the court case. The trap was perfectly set. React emotionally and provide evidence of instability, or stay calm and seem to validate their system. The next morning arrived too soon. My phone alarm barely got through the exhaustion fog, but the email from the school counselor cut through like ice water. Mandatory meeting before first period about concerning family dynamics. They wouldn't specify who had contacted them, but I could guess. The meeting would make me late for AP Chemistry, starting a cascade of academic consequences. The counselor's office felt smaller than I remembered. She pulled out a thick folder, my name labeled on the tab. Inside, documentation going back to kindergarten. My parents had been building this file for 12 years. Finger paintings analyzed for inappropriate, reaching behaviors. First grade teacher reports about excessive desire for praise and physical reinforcement. Every hug I'd sought, every hand I'd held, cataloged as evidence of addiction. My phone buzzed constantly during the meeting. The sister's negative 347 points hits hard. And it's interesting how the counselor meeting connects back to kindergarten, showing this wasn't a sudden decision, but a long-planned system that started when the OP was just 5 years old. Classmates checking if I was okay, offering support, asking if they could help. Each text would be screenshot by my parents, added to their evidence file of me recruiting touch suppliers and building an enabling network. Even kindness became ammunition in their war against human connection. After the meeting, I stopped by the nurse's office. The bruises from the closeness alarms had darkened to purple-black perfect circles where the electric shocks had fired. The nurse took photos, initially concerned, until I explained their source. Her expression shifted. This wasn't abuse in any way, she was trained to recognize. She marked it as self-inflicted for attention in my file. Another piece of evidence my parents could use. The hallway cleared as I walked to class. Word had spread about my parents' mass email to the school community. Touch boundary guidelines for interacting with our child. Students pressed against lockers to maintain distance. My former lab partner switched seats. The guy I'd been flirting with in English wouldn't make eye contact. I'd become radioactive, untouchable in the most literal sense. My parents now controlled the family phone plan completely. Every text cost them money. My data limited to reduce harmful contact. My best friend's supportive messages were costing them 25 cents each in overages, which they'd add to my debt. Even digital connection came with a price tag. Now 3 hours of sleep had become my new normal. The closeness alarms went off whenever the cat jumped on my bed, whenever I rolled too close to the wall, whenever anything moved within the sensor range. Being so tired made everything harder. Focusing in class, remembering assignments, keeping up the grades I needed for college applications. The AP Chemistry pop quiz might as well have been written in a foreign language. My sleep-deprived brain couldn't process the formulas I'd memorized just last week. The F would tank my average, but worse was coming. My chemistry teacher had agreed to write my college recommendation letter. The only teacher who'd seemed to understand my situation. She pulled me aside after class, her face apologetic, but firm. She couldn't stake her professional reputation on a student showing such recent instability affecting academic performance. Theater provided no escape either. The spring musical needed funding, and my parents had deep pockets. The director explained it wasn't personal. They simply couldn't afford to lose donor support. The lead role I'd earned would go to someone else, someone whose parents didn't create complications. That evening, I discovered the discrepancy in the court order paperwork. They listed the funeral date wrong by 2 days, a simple clerical error that might void the entire order. But proving it required documentation. I didn't have the death certificate, the funeral home records. Only my friend could access those, and asking meant making her relive the worst day of her life. I met her at the coffee shop where we used to study together. Her hands trembled as I explained what I needed. She'd help, she said, but the pain in her eyes was devastating. She broke down completely, sobbing that maybe our friendship had caused all this suffering. Maybe if we hadn't been close, my parents wouldn't have escalated. Maybe her father would understand her putting herself through this pain for me. We sat in silence after her tears stopped. Both of us understood the truth now. My parents would never stop escalating. They'd increase pressure until I either complied completely or broke entirely. There was no middle ground, no compromise, no path to peace. The touch system would consume everything until nothing remained but points and transactions and the hollow arithmetic of love. My mother showed up at the grief support group the following week. She sat in the circle of mourners, notepad balanced on her knee, offering carefully measured pats on shoulders while explaining her philosophy of appropriate comfort within healthy boundaries. When my friend's mother mentioned how much the funeral hug had meant to her daughter, my mother quoted my deceased grandmother's favorite saying about hugs healing hearts, then added her own twist about moderation, preventing emotional dependency. The group facilitators shifted uncomfortably as my mother distributed laminated cards listing healthy touch alternatives and demonstrated proper handshake duration. My friend texted me from across the room, her hands shaking as she typed. Her mother had started questioning whether their grief process involved excessive physical comfort seeking. The poison was spreading. CPS arrived at our house 3 days later. Someone had filed an anonymous report about the touch detention room and point system. My parents greeted the investigator with prepared binders documenting their innovative parenting approach. They presented research papers, testimonials from their therapist, and carefully edited video clips showing us children thriving under the system. The investigator asked to speak with each of us separately. When my turn came, my parents produced my own childhood journal entries, page after page of my 7-year-old handwriting. praising the touch system. I'm special because Daddy counts my hugs. One entry read. Other kids waste their touches, but I save mine for important things. My own words weaponized against me. My 8-year-old brother's teacher called that afternoon. He'd been telling classmates we weren't allowed to touch his sister because she had a sickness that makes her steal hugs. His drawings showed our family, with me separated by thick black walls, reaching through bars toward stick figures labeled normal people. The teacher wanted to discuss his concerning artistic expressions. Neighbors started sending my parents their Ring doorbell footage. Commentary starts. The way the mother shows up at the grief support group and starts teaching healthy touch alternatives to actual mourners. That's such a powerful way to show how these parents can't see past their own system, even in spaces meant for healing. I find it interesting how the story uses the CPS visit to reveal those old journal entries where the narrator praised the touch system as a child, because it shows how deeply this conditioning goes and how the parents have been collecting evidence for years. Commentary ends here. One video captured my aggressive hug at the funeral from an angle that removed all context. Just me grabbing someone, their body language invisible. Another showed me sitting in my car outside the house at 2 a.m., which they labeled stalking behavior, though I'd simply been afraid to go inside and trigger the closeness alarms. The family court treated my complaints as typical teenage rebellion. The judge reviewed my parents' documentation and concluded they were simply enforcing reasonable parental boundaries. My father's presentation on the touch system impressed the court with its thoughtful structure and clear behavioral goals. Nobody seemed to notice my sister's hollow eyes or my brother's flinching when anyone moved too quickly. Late one night, I remembered my father's laptop password from years ago when he'd had me help with spreadsheets. His cloud account was still accessible. The touch research folder went deeper than I'd imagined. Videos of all 4 children sleeping, annotated with observations about unconscious touch attempts. Charts tracking our affection-seeking patterns dating back to infancy. One video showed my mother reaching for my crib, then pulling back to make a notation instead. My Instagram history became evidence. Every photo where I appeared happy showed physical contact. Friends with arms around shoulders. Team huddles after theater performances. Casual touches that normal people never think twice about. My parents created a presentation showing this pattern of touch addiction manifesting through social media. They analyzed caption sentiment against touch frequency, proving their point with graphs and statistics. The school guidance counselor was forced to report my concerning questions from sophomore year. During a routine wellness check, I'd asked whether love required physical touch, whether families who never hugged could still be close. She'd noted it as philosophical curiosity then. Now it became evidence of my long-standing obsession with physical contact that my parents had been trying to manage. I attempted to record my mother's threats one evening. Phone hidden in my pocket. The closeness alarm triggered mid-conversation, shrieking so loudly the recording became unintelligible static. My mother smiled, knowing exactly what had happened. She'd timed the alarm perfectly. Another demonstration of the system's sophistication. Control. Elementary school pickup became a new battleground. I was listed as an authorized pickup for my brother, but my parents arranged for a touch monitor volunteer to supervise our interactions. A PTA mother with a clipboard documented every moment. How I buckled his seatbelt without making contact. How he pressed himself against the car door to maintain distance. How neither of us spoke during the 10-minute drive. Our family doctor chose his 20-year relationship with my parents over documenting the psychological damage. When I showed him the closeness alarm bruises, he noted them as minor electrical burns from unknown source. When I explained the touch detention room, he suggested I might be misinterpreting a mindfulness space. He'd delivered all 4 of us. He attended my parents' wedding. He couldn't pick sides, he said. The revelation that my mother was sleeping in my bed came through my sister. she whispered it during a supervised sibling visit. How Mom wore my old pajamas and used my pillow, monitoring for nighttime boundary violations. The pillow still smelled like my shampoo, my sister said. My mother had started a new log tracking how many times I attempted unconscious contact with objects I'd previously touched. My father offered a deal: make a public apology at my cousin's wedding for my attention-seeking behavior, and he'd forgive half my touch debt. Stand before our extended family and admit I'd overreacted, that the touch system was reasonable, and I'd been rebellious. The wedding was in 3 weeks. He'd already drafted the speech. When I refused, he sent an email to 47 extended relatives. The subject line read, "Choosing pride over family healing." The email detailed my rejection of generous forgiveness and my determination to destroy family harmony. Aunts who'd hugged me freely as a child now sent messages about respecting parental wisdom and the importance of family unity. The touch tracking system was more sophisticated than I'd remembered. During a heated argument, my father revealed I'd been thinking of an older model. The new version tracked closeness without touch, building intent-to-touch profiles based on movement patterns. Every time I'd walked past my sister's room, every pause near my brother's backpack, all documented as potential boundary violations. Cleaning out the attic for evidence, I discovered my grandmother's diary. Her own mother had kept affection ledgers, tracking every hug given and received, maintaining careful balance between her children. The entries showed generations of measured love, calculated comfort, rationed affection. My father hadn't invented this system. He'd inherited and modernized it. Finding my father crying over the diary changed nothing. He sat surrounded by his mother's touch logs, tears streaming as he traced entries with his finger. But his tears, mixed with pride, not regret. He saw the generational documentation as proof the system worked. His mother had loved him within boundaries, and he'd grown up strong. He was honoring her memory by perfecting her methods. My aunt faced an impossible choice when I asked her to support my emancipation petition. She wanted to help, but my parents controlled access to her grandchildren. If she sided with me, she'd lose her weekly visits with my siblings. She chose them, slipping me $200 and some pages from my grandmother's diary before walking away. "Your mother is all I have left of my sister," she explained. I started documenting my parents' touches with each other, turning their system against them. The data revealed massive debt in their own relationship. They maintained careful distance, scheduling their minimal physical contact, documenting marital interactions with the same cold precision they applied to their children. Their marriage was a business partnership with intimacy spreadsheets. Meeting my father's boss at the coffee shop wasn't accidental. I'd learned his routine, positioning myself to randomly encounter him as I described my father's innovative parenting methods. His face changed. The boss unconsciously shifted away when I offered a handshake, suddenly understanding why my father tracked every workplace interaction. The professional consequences were beginning. My father's cloud account revealed the darkest truth yet. He charged my mother points for marital intimacy, maintaining detailed spreadsheets of physical transactions between them. Every aspect of their relationship was quantified, measured, traded. Date nights required point negotiations. Their bedroom had a tracker. Their marriage was the ultimate expression of the touch economy. The marriage counselor my parents had been seeing was contacted by CPS after my father's work presentation went viral internally. The counselor's notes revealed my parents had sought help for touch inequality issues in their relationship. My mother felt she was overpaying for affection, while my father believed she was emotionally overspending. They'd never seen the irony: fighting the custody battle while homeless meant missing the SAT registration deadline. My parents refused to pay the late fee, calling it a natural consequence of my choices. College applications required test scores I couldn't provide, recommendations I'd lost, transcripts showing my recent academic collapse. Every door was closing systematically, Legal aid required a $500 retainer I didn't have. My parents retained their family lawyer on permanent retainer, a friend from their college days who'd helped design the legal framework for the touch system. He'd even published papers on parental rights to behavioral modification, citing my family as a success story. The legal system was stacked against me. The confrontation at my workplace was inevitable. My parents arrived during the dinner rush, creating a scene about my abandonment of family values. Customers stared as my father read from his tablet about touch addiction, while my mother documented my aggressive body language on her phone. The restaurant banned them, but the damage was done. I was a liability no business could afford. My manager delivered the termination notice with genuine regret. 3 parental disruptions had made me unemployable. The PTA president's daughter needed a job, and my parents had recommended her personally. She'd start Monday, taking my shifts. My income, my last connection to normalcy. I packed my belongings while my mother watched from the parking lot. Living in my car behind the 24-hour Walmart became my new reality. My parents told everyone I'd chosen homelessness over family love, painting themselves as heartbroken parents with an ungrateful child. The narrative spread through social media, church groups, neighborhood forums. I became the cautionary tale that proved their system's necessity. My grandfather's intervention surprised me. He drove to the Walmart at dawn, tapping on my car window with tears in his eyes. He begged me to stop torturing my mother, explaining she only knew what she'd been taught. His own touch trauma emerged. A military father who'd struck affection out of him, creating the generational wound my parents were perpetuating. He thought their system was healing, not deepening the damage. Investigating the touch system's origins had unintended consequences. My grandmother's elderly sister was shunned from her senior center after I'd contacted her for information. Her friends of 40 years suddenly avoided her, though she couldn't understand why. My search for truth was destroying innocent connections, rippling damage through generations. The sister's isolation led to a fall in her apartment. Nobody checked on her for 3 days. When I learned what had happened, the guilt was crushing, but I couldn't stop documenting. The system had to be exposed, even if the investigation caused collateral damage. I was becoming like my parents, prioritizing an abstract goal over human suffering. My last supportive teacher asked the question I couldn't answer during mandatory counseling. What if the system had saved you from becoming an actual touch addict? What if your parents' restrictions had prevented something worse? I couldn't immediately refute her logic without sounding desperate for physical contact, which would prove their point. The system's circular logic was perfect. Maintaining credibility meant admitting my own failures. I publicly acknowledged stealing $20 from my mother's purse at age 12. Needing money for a school field trip my points couldn't cover. The confession gave my parents ammunition, but established my honesty about everything else. Truth required sacrifice. The evidence that haunted me most was my own childhood cruelty. Security footage showed me ignoring my brother's tears during touch detention to preserve points for my friend's birthday party. I'd chosen a party over my baby brother's pain, proving the system's corrosive effect on empathy. My parents had made me complicit in their abuse. Their lawyer filed an emergency motion after I was seen lurking near the elementary school. I'd only been trying to give my brother his forgotten lunch money, but the optics were damaging. The court order expanded to include school, property. My attempts to help my siblings were reframed as stalking. My love recast as danger. My father's revelation during a supervised visit broke something in me. Wow. The grandfather's visit adds another layer to this family pattern. That teacher's question about whether the system prevented something worse is clever manipulation. Not going to lie, it traps the op no matter how they answer. He genuinely believed he was fixing generational trauma. Through scientific touch regulation, his PowerPoints showed absolute faith that controlled touch created stronger bonds than his own chaotic upbringing. He wasn't evil. He was broken, perpetuating damage while believing he was healing. Using my siblings as weapons in court felt like betrayal. Asking my sister to testify about the pneumonia incident meant making her relive trauma. Coaching my brother to describe the touch detention room required manipulating his trust. I was learning to document everything, like my parents taught me, becoming the cold strategist they'd trained. The final evidence came from telling my 8-year-old brother that testifying would earn him unlimited hugs. His face lit up with hope I knew I couldn't fulfill. The promise was a lie, but his testimony was crucial. I watched myself manipulate a child's desperate need for affection, recognizing my parents' methods in my own actions. Small victories felt hollow when my father broke down during his wristband showed 0 points remaining. He'd spent everything trying to maintain the system. Watching him sob about failing his children while still defending the touch economy revealed the depth of his delusion. We were all victims of inherited trauma. My mother's counterclaim gained traction with the conservative judge. She argued my rebellion had traumatized my siblings more than the touch system ever had. My brother's drawings grew darker after I left. My sister's grades dropped. The little ones were suffering, and I was the proximate cause. The system was harmful, but my resistance was causing visible damage to Dot. Everything hinged on the marriage. Counselor's mandatory report testimony. Their therapy notes would either validate the touch system as therapeutic or expose it as abuse. The counselor had seen behind the academic presentations to the broken marriage beneath. Their professional opinion would determine whether my siblings remained in the system or found freedom. My childhood kindness became evidence against me. Video of me teaching my brother to tie his shoes was presented as appropriate touch modeling. That proved the system worked when followed correctly. He still used the bunny ear method I taught him. Evidence of positive bonding within boundaries. Every good moment was twisted to support their narrative. Teachers divided in their testimony. Some saw concerning patterns of isolation and anxiety. Others admired the structured household that produced accomplished students. The touch system's effects were subtle enough to allow interpretation. Without physical bruises, psychological torture was harder to prove. The legal system required evidence of harm that didn't exist in traditional forms. The judge's preliminary ruling emphasized that unusual isn't illegal without physical harm. The touch detention room was unconventional, but not criminal. The point system was strange, but not abusive by legal standards. My parents' methods fell into a gray area the law couldn't easily address. Innovation in parenting, even harmful innovation, wasn't necessarily illegal. I contacted a local news reporter who owed my deceased friend's father for an exclusive story years ago. She agreed to cover the hearing, but wouldn't investigate deeper. Without more families coming forward, the touch system affected only us, making it a curiosity rather than a scandal. Individual family dysfunction didn't merit investigative journalism. Accessing my parents' home security footage through my father's saved passwords revealed the ultimate hypocrisy. After enforcing strict ratios all day, my parents touched freely. Once we children were in bed, they hugged, held hands, cuddled on the couch, all without point tracking. They'd created artificial scarcity to make their own affection seem more valuable while denying us the same freedom. This discovery reframed everything. The touch system wasn't about preventing addiction or building character. It was about control, about making parental love so rare it seemed precious. They hugged each other while we counted points, loved freely while rationing our access to their affection. The psychological manipulation was more sophisticated than I'd imagined. The security footage timestamps revealed their nightly routine. Every evening at 10:47 p.m., after confirming all children were in their rooms, my parents would disable the living room touch monitors. They'd spend hours intertwined on the couch, accumulating what would have cost us thousands of points. The hypocrisy was documented in their own surveillance system. I compiled the footage methodically, creating a presentation that mirrored my father's own style. Split screens, showing them enforcing point deductions during the day, then touching freely at night. The data spoke louder than any accusation could. Their system wasn't about preventing touch addiction. It was about hoarding affection for themselves. The next morning brought an unexpected development. My father's work presentation had surfaced on the company's internal message board. An employee had recorded his lunch seminar on gamifying family affection, where he'd proudly displayed slides about touch detention rooms and point tracking systems. The company logo was visible on every slide, creating an association they couldn't ignore. His boss called an emergency meeting. The recording had spread through 3 departments before IT could contain it. Clients were asking questions. The HR department was fielding calls from concerned employees about my father's management philosophy. The presentation that was meant to showcase innovation had become a liability. My father's subsequent suspension wasn't about the touch system itself. It was about using company resources to promote it. About the liability of having an executive who publicly advocated for tracking children's physical affection. The unpaid administrative leave pending investigation meant no income, no health insurance, no stability. The system that demanded perfect control was creating chaos. I used his work email access one final time before IT revoked it. The touch research folder contained something I'd missed. Correspondence with other parents attempting similar systems. 3 families in different states, all sharing spreadsheets and enforcement strategies. But their emails told a darker story. 2 had already seen their children removed by CPS. 1 couple had divorced when their point negotiations turned violent. My parents weren't pioneers. They were part of a failed experiment. The marriage counselor's testimony arrived through official channels. Their notes revealed my mother's growing awareness that the system was damaging, but her inability to stop. She described feeling trapped between her husband's certainty and her children's suffering. The counselor had recommended discontinuing the system 18 months ago. My parents had stopped attending sessions instead. My grandmother's full diary arrived via certified mail from her elderly sister's estate lawyer. She'd passed away from complications after her fall, but she'd updated her will to ensure I received the complete records. 4 generations of touch trauma documented in careful handwriting. Each generation had tried to improve on the last, adding technology and structure to emotional dysfunction. The diary's most damning entry came from 1962. My great-grandmother had been institutionalized for hysteria after begging strangers for hugs in the town square. The doctor's notes described her pathological need for physical affection and prescribed isolation treatment. She died alone in that institution, never touching another human in her final years. The touch system wasn't discipline. It was generational. Mental illness disguised as structure. My father's breakdown came during a supervised exchange at the courthouse. He saw me reviewing the diary, recognized his grandmother's handwriting. The realization that he'd been perpetuating her tragedy, rather than preventing it, shattered his certainty. He collapsed in the hallway, his 0-point wristband still blinking as he reached reflexively for comfort that the system wouldn't allow. The judge ordered immediate psychological evaluations for the entire family. The court-appointed psychologist